All right, welcome to yet another session of 9 p.m. Conversations. We have Lokesh with us. Hi, Lokesh. Welcome again.
Hi Prashant, how are you?
I'm good. So, I'll quickly summarize yesterday's conversation. So, yesterday we talked about how in the post-industrial construct of the society, we could actually be seeing the need for violence coming down and future generations somehow unlearning the idea of violence. And so that is more in the hypothetical space, though we see a lot of trends that we had talked about, a lot of violence moving online, and our lives becoming more secure, the incidents of violent crime reducing for normal people, though the crime rate might be whatever it is. Also, wars reducing. So, a lot of indicators we have in terms of reducing violence. The question we left hanging yesterday was that our pop culture still has a lot of violence. The movies that we talk about, you see Netflix, you see OTT, a lot of content. Every second story is either about a heist or about gangsters or about drug
Yeah.
smugglers or about revenge stories or about a jealous husband killing his wife or a jealous
Terrorism or
wife
those
killing
kind of
her,
things.
or
Absolutely.
terrorism.
Or terrorism.
We don't. And obviously I also shared my pet peeve with a lot of pop culture references. I come from small town UP and the real badlands where I've heard stories like, if you are growing up in that area, it is taken for granted that you would have seen a desi katta, or boys in your school would be bringing those country
Did
guns
you?
and stuff like that.
Have you seen
I
a
did
Desi
not.
Katta?
I
You have
did
not seen
not.
a
I
Desi
did not.
Katta? Okay.
I saw it much later. I saw it last year, but
Wow.
not
So your
not
bucket list,
before
eh?
that. It was not so deliberate, but yeah, when the chance sort of offered itself, I did not say no. But yes, more like bucket list, and that essentially captures everything. I mean, because you are born there, there are so many stories about every little boy roaming around with a desi country gun, so might as well see it. But I had not witnessed so much of violence or any of that violence that we typically talk about in the context of the badlands of UP when I grew up in 80s. So 80s to now, the violence is still much reduced. But again, pop culture is filled with violent stories. Why is that so? Why are our movies, our stories so much about violence? If you look at publishing world, for example, the novels, most of them are essentially about crime, murder mystery, about revenge stories, about terrorism, about espionage.
Absolutely.
90% of stories of fiction would probably fall, commercial fiction at least would fall in that space. Why is that so?
So let's look at it from two, three angles as to what you have. Let me try and maybe pick a couple of aspects of what you have said so far. So one, you
Hmm.
said crime is coming down, or so violence is coming down.
Violence is coming down.
One of the ways to probably understand it, and what people would say, is because our ability to enforce law and order has gone up, and there is a causative model to it. You are able to enforce law and order better, and a lot of things would happen.
Hmm.
Hmm? So that's one angle to look at it. What we have been arguing from some to some extent is that there might be a more normative kind of a force, or maybe a
Hmm.
systemic kind of a thing which is handling it. So the role of the state and the policing systems and law enforcement, they are important.
Hmm.
So we're not belittling it, we are not ignoring it, but what we're saying is that it's maybe fundamentally more important things happening here. And how would pop culture work? I'll probably share an anecdotal framework, and it's up to you whether you would agree or disagree with it. And I think we've discussed this sometime in the past, and
Hmm.
this used to intrigue me a lot. As a youngster, and a lot of us, I was like enamored by Arthur Conan Doyle and Agatha Christie's and those kind of stuff, the detective stories. There was a phase, maybe late 19th century, early 20th century, that the detective phase became the detective novels and detective literature became like a super mainstream. So today also, if you look at maybe a lot of Netflix or HBO, you find that detective framework. Another piece here, which is linked to crime or violence, as you said, but with a detective angle. So the angle is more
Yes.
the core of the story is not the violence, not the hero or that. It is more the detection of it and this
The
thing,
aftermath of violence.
the aftermath, more from not the implications of it, but who done it, kind of a framework. Now, why did detective and these frameworks become so important, say, late 19th century and the early 20th century? And if you look at popular literature today, they seem to be not that critical now. We don't have an Arthur Conan Doyle or an Agatha Christie kind of a character. We don't have a Sherlock Holmes or a Hercule Poirot or Miss Marple, those kind of characters now. So why is that happening? One, we could just say that it happened, and there could be
I mean,
another plausible way to look at it. Yeah, sorry.
The simplest and the obviously wrong answer is that the modern day writers are not as capable as Agatha Christie's and Arthur Conan Doyle's of the
That's
old
hard to
era.
imagine. That's hard to do. At least digest. That's hard to digest. So is there another alternative framework which can seem plausible as an explanation? Is what we are exploring here, and that might give us insights into pop culture if we tend to agree with some of the arguments being made. So the core construct probably being made here is that if you look back and say if you look at India in the old, it was the role of the king to probably be he was the judge, he was the supreme judge. We have the roles of Vikramaditya, who was like, and Sinhasan Battisi and Vikram and Betal and all those frameworks, wherein the king as the supreme judge trying to solve those questions, trying to provide justice. We have the Akbar Birbal, wherein there is a lot of framework, or the Tenali Ram frameworks, wherein not only are they wits, but they are also probably playing the role of supporting or helping the king in providing justice.
Administering justice, yes.
Administrating justice, being the judge who's trying to figure out what happened and why and how that happened. Now, imagine a world wherein, as we discussed, a state framework started to come in. So monarchy moved away from that into a state. And when we talk about the structure of the state that came in, it became far more bureaucratic. Bureaucracy used to exist there, but there was a monarch on top. This became bureaucratic. And you had judges and you had prosecutors, and that kind of a framework of justice started to come in. Now, if you were a common person, what did you need? If somebody was sentenced for some crime, you wanted to feel the confidence that yes, this crime has not been seen. There is nobody who is an eyewitness. In most of these crime models, if you look at the Sherlock Holmes and the Agatha Christie, and we just named two for simplicity. The crime is not straightforward. There is no clear, obvious person or who done it. So in that kind of a framework, if somebody is said to be the person, the instigator, or the person who committed the crime, and is given a punishment, and a fairly severe punishment, and the person giving that punishment is a judge who's come from a nameless, faceless bureaucratic system, you want to feel the confidence that this works fine. This system is powerful, it can administer that justice.
And you're saying that need did not exist in monarchy?
In monarchy, largely it was a very different system. In the monarchical system, it was hard to imagine that you could influence the king and I could not. The king was levels and levels above us.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm? And even if you could influence it, wherein somebody was very powerful, it was like, so be it, you have more power.
Mm-hmm.
People which were equal or similar, and which is the common standard that we try and perceive of things from. So if you and I were similar, then what the king said was fine. I could not outplay you in this game.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm?
Okay.
I could
Okay.
out.
So you're saying if people like you and me start administering justice, then we probably need that extra trust and confidence that this guy who's very similar to me would still be impartial and just and fair.
So one
Is
is
that what you're
impartial. One is impartial. Second, the framework of justice that is being administered. There
saying?
is a logical framework behind it, which gives me that confidence to believe in it.
Mm-hmm.
So one reason probably, if you look at, so this was one side of it. If you look at the media also highlights a lot of negative stories, and we today say negative stories have far stronger wings and they fly at a speed much faster than, or they spread at a much faster
Positive
rate than
stories.
positive stories. There was probably a need at this time for the system to get sorted. So one, there was this need for this information. If something bad is happening, I need to keep away from it. If something good is happening, if I come to know or don't come to know, it does not matter.
Mm-hmm.
So if you look at it from that framework, what affects me, a bad thing affects me more, I need to keep away. So you need that information.
Mm-hmm.
The need for that information is far more. And we're not talking about now situations when we're talking about media, which is something happening somewhere so far that it's never gonna affect me.
Mm-hmm.
If of those things. Second,
We're
what
talking
do you
about
want to,
things which are very immediate.
which are far more immediate. So they need to travel much faster. If there is a fire that breaks out somewhere, it need that information needs to travel much faster than maybe if there was somebody who did something good.
Mm-hmm.
That distinction I'm drawing out.
Okay.
One. So which is why if there are some bad activities happening somewhere or crime happening somewhere, it needs to be understood.
Mm-hmm.
The second side of it, as we talked about, we need to also understand how it's getting redressed, and the redressal is proper because it's coming from a
Mm-hmm.
faceless system. So, what the detective system gave us, what did Sherlock Holmes tell us? Sherlock Holmes told us, in some sense, that if these detectives who are going and investigating these crimes, and we know
Mm-hmm.
these detectives came after the event happened, there is no
Mm-hmm.
eyewitness, there is no way to
Mm-hmm.
say, there is no framework here which is saying that God is watching you with, or there are a million CCTVs. Nobody has seen anything. We can still deduce it.
Mm-hmm.
It is plausible to deduce it. And
Mm-hmm.
here in these stories, we are telling you, okay, here are these 50 stories of Sherlock Holmes, which tell you how this deduction happened, so that you get convinced that such a system works. In some
So
sense,
we are saying, uh-huh.
what does Sherlock Holmes
We
tell us? Sherlock
uh-huh.
Holmes tells us, gives us the conviction that when somebody starts arguing it, and when forensics come in and this comes in, how do I know forensics, or it's coming from pop culture? In real life,
Mm-hmm.
you would have never seen what does fingerprinting mean, what does fingerprinting matching means, what's forensic,
Mm-hmm.
how do you pick up a hair and this, and what are shoe sizes, and what are the marks left by shoe sizes, what does the butt of a cigarette mean, what does this mean. This is all coming from pop culture,
Mm-hmm.
the implication. And what is it helping us tell? That yes, there are telltale signs which I, when I see it, I can't see them.
Mm-hmm.
But when these guys walk in, they can pick them up, and then using processes and frameworks, they can establish, in more cases than not, more often than not, they can go and solve it. And when they solve it to such a degree of confidence that we can trust the whole system.
So are you saying that these crime stories uh, and they obviously there was a need to do it. These crime stories essentially try to convince us that कानून के हाथ वाकई बहुत लंबे होते
They,
Is
So
that
not
what?
only they tell us that it is the hands of law are like that, they help us appreciate, understand, build confidence in that system.
Uh-huh.
Something that sounds so illogical. A crime happened, nobody saw it, and hey presto, a guy walks in and says, "Okay, I will tell you what happened."
Mm-hmm.
Imagine this whole detective and crime fiction did not exist. If somebody told you
Mm-hmm.
this, would you believe it?
Mm-hmm.
Would you believe it? Now,
Uh-huh.
what does a Sherlock Holmes do? A Sherlock Holmes gives us that confidence that here is a neutral guy, and which is why these characters have been shown to be slightly absurd in that sense that they are not partisan. If you look at all these detective characters, they are non-partisan. They are in some sense motivated by their trade. They don't value the outcomes. They value the process and their ability to solve it. That's the common construct
Basi-
all of it.
Basically, typically, they are loners, social misfits, don't have a huge
The kind of, if I
family.
can use, they are the sadhu variety guys. Although that might
Uh-huh.
not be, they're loners more from that perspective that don't have a bias. They don't have an interest. They're
Mm-hmm.
disinterested in actually why that guy. So they're disinterested with mankind to some extent. They're
Mm-hmm.
interested in the crime and solving the crime. They're like
Mm-hmm.
mathematicians, interested in the problem, not in the relationship part of it.
Mm-hmm.
That's a construct there. That's a very powerful construct. Otherwise the guy becomes biased, the guy becomes partisan, and you can't build that confidence with it.
Mm-hmm.
You and I can't say when they pick up this, or when Sherlock Holmes says this guy would be left-handed and this would be here, you tend to trust him. you tend you
Mm-hmm.
can't you can't figure it out. You tend to trust him. Now this is a
Mm-hmm.
role which society probably needed, and that
Mm-hmm.
need was very very strong at that point in time. And a body of literature came up
Mm-hmm.
to satisfy that need, to build us that confidence. Once you and I feel, understand that there is a framework called detective framework, you can analyze crime, you can derive a lot of data points and stuff from it. Probably the value of it, the first time you would have read the first Sherlock Holmes story, it would have just you apart, blown you.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how can somebody do it? Now, when you
Mm-hmm.
read maybe after 50 stories, the impact is far lower. Why? Because the magic of Sherlock Holmes is the same. But you have come from, say, a non believer or something, you couldn't visualize to now this is mainstream, this is commonplace. That's the shift
Uh-huh.
that
Mm-hmm.
this body of literature did for us. And now
Mm-hmm.
what has happened? So imagine the late 19th century, that early 20th century, this kind of body literature was not even, neither existed, and was
Mm-hmm.
not in our common psyche. Now when we sit and think about it, why? So if today's generation, if we look at, probably they are less interested in a Sherlock Holmes and a Agatha Christie than probably the generation earlier and the generation earlier.
Uh-huh.
Why would that be the case? Probably because now in our common pop culture, in our common psyche, we believe this thing is plausible. So from something which was implausible or science fiction, it the 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 common belief is this exists, this is plausible. So I don't it does not seem that exciting. Or to put it differently, its value has come down. My need to
Well,
read it, or the system pushing me to read it, has come down
or
because its job is done.
are you saying that once I understand or once I am convinced that
Once you start
detecting a
feeling or believing, I would not use the word convinced
yes,
or hmm,
okay,
understand. Once it
once I
becomes very very obvious to you that something like this happens.
once I start believing that if somebody steals something from my house and nobody is watching him, still a good detective can catch him. Or if somebody kills me
Hmm,
when nobody is watching, and
hmm,
but if I get a good detective, he'll be able to find that guy. Once we
hmm,
are start believing that idea, then it becomes a solved problem, and so we start losing interest in it. Is
So,
that
so
what
two
we
things happen. So two things happen. One, it deters crime because now the person who is wanting to or might have a tendency or a need to commit a crime knows that even if so as you said कानून के हाथ बहुत लंबे हैं. The more important import of that statement is not to the guy who's the aggrieved party. The
Hmm.
impact is that if that statement is true, the propensity to crime reduces drastically.
Uh-huh.
So the first import is, which is why we highlight these stories and we
Hmm.
highlight their resolution, is to tell people that even if you believe that nobody saw you, doesn't matter. Somebody will come and catch you. All you need is a reasonable detective. And even if 10 days pass, if you look at Sherlock Holmes models or maybe Hercule Poirot goes 5 years back in time and solves the problem. What is it telling us?
Hmm.
What is it telling us? It's giving us the confidence that you have to live with this guilt, this thing forever. And hence you will commit mistakes. So it's behavior influencing in nature.
Hmm.
Hmm? It has in some sense a self-fulfilling prophecy built into it. The more you inculcate this, the more you
Hmm.
push this into common psyche, you are otherwise the notion could have been that I committed a crime, nobody saw it, and it's over. Nobody can come after me. Suppose that was the common
Lokesh,
perception.
I get it. But if that were the case,
Hmm.
wouldn't the heydays of detective literature would
Hmm.
have seen drop in violent crime rates, or maybe if not immediately, then after a lag of 10-20 years, wouldn't
Uh-huh.
that have happened?
So we don't know what the rates would have been normally. Imagine such an unequal society, people walking across, nobody knows anybody. So we don't know the number to benchmark from. First, let's remember that. So
Okay,
we
then
don't
that
know.
that makes this question unanswerable. I mean, we
So
can't
to some
really say.
extent, yes. To some extent, yes. Because it's important because
Hmm.
you're coming from a benchmark or a baseline. When you're articulating that question, in some sense, you're putting out a baseline.
Hmm.
Hmm? So we
Okay.
are creating, in some sense, if we can call it human mythologies here,
Uh-huh.
which are very, very critical, which are very powerful, which help the whole system.
Hmm.
Hmm? In a lot of cases, we see in at least popular culture or Netflix, somebody after 5 years is guilt ridden because he believes everybody is watching him because he did something wrong. So where does that notion come from?
Lokesh, the training to feel guilt after you've done something wrong, and by wrong I mean a violent crime, a
Hmm.
very broad definition, let's say murder.
Hmm.
You'd find this theme in a lot of Shakespearean plays. Now, this is like 200, 300 years before detective literature came.
Absolutely. So there the idea was you feel guilt.
Uh-huh. I mean, you see
You
Macbeth, the guy
Macbeth is
literally kills
exactly a story
himself and
wherein because they just go insane. So the framework
they
Shakespeare came
just
up
go
with
insane.
was that you get guilt ridden and you go insane. So that's the first frameworks that we put out. They are very powerful frameworks.
Hmm.
Now here we are extending those frameworks. So it's a continuum wherein we have put in another set of people who will now be able to figure it out from your activities because you'll commit some error.
Hmm.
So think about it as a virtual universe that we have created around it. That event has gone. It has probably no history now,
Hmm.
but we've created it, and with that we have made the system far more stable or better or whatever we want to call it. Second, we
Uh-huh.
have so there is this play happening to some extent. Literature, the role of literature, as I would see it, is it's playing like in step with these forces, with these systems, and trying to create a mainstreaming of those ideas.
Are you saying that the role of literature, and by literature I also mean the later forms of storytelling, which includes movies, which includes TV series, OTT programming?
Hmm.
I think what you're saying is that the core job of that, or one of the core functions that it performs, is training masses of people into feeling in a certain way. I mean,
Absolutely.
Shakespeare, you read Macbeth, you read, I think there are a couple more of his plays which deal about guilt.
Hmm.
So what you are telling, and I read it like at a very early age. So the idea that if I do something wrong, the guilt itself will not let me live peacefully. That just gets planted in my head.
And it's such a powerful construct from a
A
societal
very powerful
perspective.
idea.
The society need
Mm-hmm.
not do retribution and solve it out. It's a solution itself. And what are we talking
Mm-hmm.
about here? If we step back and we'll come back from the idea of the model that we were talking about, the pop culture. The
Mm-hmm.
more I watch television and the more I watch, so like we said, if I read 50 of these Sherlock Holmes stories, in some sense,
Mm-hmm.
I start to believe in them. That yes,
Uh-huh.
these things are true. There will always be some remnants or some fingerprints or something. There is no perfect crime. Somebody, even
Yes.
if 6 months have passed, 12 months have passed, does not mean anything. It's doing that with me.
Mm-hmm.
This is the impression it's creating, and in some sense,
Mm-hmm.
that starts becoming reality.
Mm-hmm.
So it's imagine a world wherein this was not real. Maybe the problem would have been 10x harder to figure out.
Uh-huh.
Maybe the crime rates would have been harder to figure out.
Mm-hmm.
When it happened, maybe when Sherlock Holmes came up, maybe our detective frameworks were not that strong. Today, probably we have evolved to such a strong technology that you don't need that level of detection, which is why detective novels have probably lost their sheen.
Probably lost this thing. Uh-huh.
At that point in time, it was very expensive. You need proper training. So these
Mm-hmm.
cycles that are going through, let's do it. And once they get imprinted, say on a generation, a lot of these things just need far lesser, let's call it screen time or cycle time. The generation is passing it, and the belief is getting passed from the previous generation, and all you need to do is slightly support it and augment it, because that's
Uh-huh.
become a common belief.
More like starting a process versus just maintaining it. Once
Maintaining
the
it.
idea
That's the
has been
difference.
planted, you just need to
Absolutely.
maintain that idea.
If your father believes that this is what's going to happen, if your parents believe it, your uncles believe it, to some extent, half of the job is done.
Okay, interestingly, I have something to share here. I actually so I come, like I said, I come from this very strong personal belief that, and a lot of it has come from movies and stories that I have consumed, that
Hmm.
if you do something wrong, and by wrong I mean a violent crime, if I go ahead and kill somebody, or do something which in my dictionary is crime, I
Hmm.
would essentially eventually suffer the fate of a Macbeth, or even Brutus in Julius Caesar. Start seeing the
Hmm.
ghost, start seeing the
Absolutely.
omens. He knows that he's going to die. So
Hmm.
that's the path that I would take. So
Yeah.
once I actually
Or the
had a
Hamlet
conversation,
model, or whichever we
or the
look at.
Hamlet model. So I
Hmm.
had a conversation about this with my father, who's
Hmm.
essentially a retired prosecutor. So he's
Okay.
seen interacted with people who've done violent crime throughout his working life.
Hmm.
I asked him that if somebody commits a murder and nobody has seen him and he doesn't get caught,
Hmm.
would he feel remorse?
Hmm.
My belief was that he would feel a very strong sense of remorse, and he would probably jump over a bridge, or jump into into fire, or kill himself some way or the other.
Hmm.
My father was very clear in the idea that no, he would not feel.
Hmm.
I mean, the guy who actually goes ahead and does it would not
Hmm.
be feeling it. So I found this thing very interesting, something
Hmm.
that came very naturally to me, that
Hmm.
if somebody does something violent or a crime, he would feel remorse, and remorse to the degree of a Macbeth.
Hmm.
Whereas The other perspective that I got was that no, he would not. What that could possibly mean is that a significant portion of those people do not see. He might not be speaking for everybody, but yes, at least
I would interpret it very differently. The
okay.
fact that you start to believe that there would be remorse
Uh-huh.
means that the chances or the probabilities that you would commit the crime have gone down substantially.
Uh-huh.
So
Okay.
think of it as a Bayesian probability.
Mm-hmm.
The probability of somebody who got trained in the system and still committed a crime may
Mm-hmm.
be thought differently.
Uh-huh.
So here the set you're talking about is not a generic set. So the sets on the other
Not
side,
a uniform set. Uh-huh.
not a uniform set. So it's more like a Bayesian problem.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's the way to look at it. That the core framework is not for those parts, and maybe in that also the corner cases, and you're pushing them to. You will get caught. What is the value of it? You will not enjoy it.
Mm-hmm.
Not the implications, as I said, maybe the crime rate, and you question that. Maybe they come down because of it. Maybe a lot fewer people commit it. Maybe something that seems so obvious that there is something lying here. Why don't I pick it up?
Mm-hmm.
Hmm? It dissuades a lot of things. The powers there are far larger.
Uh-huh.
Hmm?
Mm-hmm. More like preventive systems. What
more
we
more
say
more
of
largely about preventive system, and as somebody has commented that if they keep on repeating it, obviously in some sense it's saying the same thing, that their ability to
uh-huh.
handle it and not feel the remorse is much higher, that they're probably feeling
Mm-hmm.
differently.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm?
Mm-hmm.
And when we talk about those extreme micro cases, then society solves them. Now everything is not going to work at 100%. That's not the case. That's it's a Gaussian curve. So now how do you handle the large portion of the curve? The rest of it you do very case specific analysis. The systems are not designed to
Mm-hmm.
handle 100% of it. When we look at now extreme events, we look at very different scenarios. These solutions are
And
not for extreme events.
And obviously, if a preventive system, the success of a preventive system is in how many people it dissuades, there would still be
Absolutely.
people who would cross that threshold, and then we have
Obviously,
different systems to take care of that.
we would have different systems to take care of it. So think
Mm-hmm.
about it as more the prevention piece. We think of it more as the solution piece.
Uh-huh.
So the role of
Yeah.
these things is to build that confidence, create that notion, and do one, dissuade them, and second, build confidence in the system.
Mm-hmm.
The extreme cases have to be handled separately. We all know that the same approach does not work for all these cases. So here is one very large framework that we're looking at.
Uh-huh.
Hmm? That is how I would look at it. So when you're talking about the about your discussion with your father, that's probably a different set of people we're looking at.
Mm-hmm.
The more important
Uh-huh.
question would be that if these things did not exist, what would have happened?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Hmm?
Mm-hmm. And
They help.
and I mean, obviously not very difficult to believe or assume or sort of get in line with the idea that if these remorse training systems did not exist, or the fear of detection kind of systems did not exist, then a lot many people might consider actually going ahead with violent crimes.
Absolutely, one. The second part of it is think of these literatures and these stories as the marketing arm of it.
Uh-huh.
By making these very nice, engrossing stories, you are marketing this idea now. You're spreading
Mm-hmm.
it, and you're getting reps of marketing. So otherwise, this thought, if it's just a sermon, imagine how effective a sermon would be. What we are doing is we're making it so interesting that everybody spending reps and cycles watching it and getting completely swayed by it.
Mm-hmm.
That's the second role we're doing. So which is probably the more critical role of literature, that we want. So suppose you want to build a very good physique. What do? Every day you need to do push-ups, maybe simple thing.
Uh-huh.
That's reps. Every day you do push-ups, push-ups, push-ups. Maybe 100 days later, 200 days later, you have a much better physique. Now, if we want to build this idea, the mind needs those reps.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that is what we're doing. The way these stories are so engrossing, they are there. Otherwise, if it's just a sermon, would they be that effective? Would they be that widespread? You need some frameworks to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
there is a very, very
And obviously the simple idea that we are talking about here is that with enough exposures to a single idea, we just get trained into it.
and the fact that we are willingly consuming it. So the fact that we are willingly
Willingly
consuming
consuming
it
it.
is also a notion to say that we in fundamentally agree with it.
Uh-huh.
We are subjecting ourselves to go through it,
Mm-hmm.
willingly subjecting ourselves to it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in this context, we should come back and start looking at the question that you had posed at the outset. Why does popular culture have so much violence? The
Mm-hmm.
violence that is all around was possibly in the world. We are putting out these stories, dissuading violence, showing every angle of violence. A jealous husband, don't be jealous. It doesn't work out.
Mm-hmm.
It's in some sense all these stories are getting played out in third person.
Mm-hmm.
We are part of it. We enjoy watching them. So in some sense, I don't know whether you have heard of the mirror neurons and a concept.
No, I'm not. I'm
So
not.
mirror neurons is if you watch somebody doing something, there is a part of it which tries to imitate it, mirror it. So I'm not doing the
Okay.
thing. If you are eating an apple, a
Uh-huh.
part of me would mirror the actions of it in my body.
Okay.
Hmm?
Mm-hmm.
So which is why if you smile, I smile. If you frown, I
Mm-hmm.
frown. So we are mirroring it to some extent.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm?
Mm-hmm.
So we
Okay.
are in some sense the I would argue the reverse here. The fact that violence is such an important piece of our current framework is another data point to say that we are creating that aversion to it. We are training that every form of violence, every form of this jealousy, every form of this finally is gonna be bad.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. Now
If we
that.
remove all of this from popular culture and give a sanitized world, maybe we'll be.
Uh-huh.
How do I build that? Because imagine there is short-term benefit from those activities.
Mm-hmm.
That question is still there. There is short-term benefit from that. If I
Mm-hmm.
pick up something or steal something or do something, in more cases than not, in the short term, there is some payoff
First order positive.
for a very short period of time, maybe. Now,
Mm-hmm.
how do I do that? So we are getting bombarded with these things.
When you say for a very short time, you are also betraying that training. That
Hmm.
crime pays for only very short time.
Sorry, I didn't pick up what you said.
So what I'm saying is, we talked about.
Yeah, I get it now what you said, but
You
please.
get it.
Hmm.
I mean, this idea that violent activities or bad things, evil,
Hmm.
pays
Hmm.
for a very short time.
So the
That
emphasis I laid on very short was the part of the
yes,
training experience.
it is a
Absolutely,
part
you're
of the training.
absolutely right. So, but think of this in that nature,
Mm-hmm.
in this core. So we've created a virtual world. The world of media, the world of literature is that virtual world wherein we are. And now the way media works and the way popular media works is we are in some sense immersed in it. Our mind
Mm-hmm.
is completely immersed, and our mind is getting that those cycles, those trainings. I would term it so. The way I would term it is that there is a machine learning. Humans are
Mm-hmm.
the greatest machine learning machine.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. I agree with
Think
that.
And yesterday we were talking about something in the context of where I said we are probably not post-industrial revolution, the information age is industrial. I would
Uh-huh.
probably make a hypothesis here that the next revolution, one of the ways possibly a next revolution should come in, is when we construct a better machine learning machine than humans,
Mm-hmm.
which
Mm-hmm.
still the most
Mm-hmm.
superior machine learning machine. If we consider, again, we are a machine.
Mm-hmm.
We are the So in that machine learning, we have created this. So the role these things play is humongous. So
Mm-hmm.
it's,
Makes
it's
sense.
again the same thing. When we say violence is bad, when we talked about violence and we talked about Shiva and destruction and all that, subjugating ourselves or immersing ourselves in this actually plays a role, is positive. It probably signals that we are trying to create a shift away from it.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. So if I just recap, and I think this is a very interesting point. What we are essentially trying to say is that the abundance of violence in pop culture, stories, books, movies, TV series is probably training us to sort of hate violence or give up violence or eventually turn away from violence to the stage that maybe we can just unlearn it.
So when you watch a movie which talks about say jealousy or bad relationships or abusive relationships, how do you typically feel? You, you,
at
you
at the end
start
of it, you eventually understand that yeah, that doesn't pay, not a smart thing to do. You
not
eventually
a
have to
smart
pay
thing
a
to do. So
cost.
I would not use the word understand because understand is probably a different framework. Some part
Uh-huh.
of you has seen. So imagine again, let's take a machine learning framework. At a very basic level, a machine learning framework can be said as a framework of inputs and outputs. And when we see a certain set of inputs and it causes an output, we start building correlations and some frameworks in between. That's your machine. The machine is seeing inputs, it's seeing outputs. Now, when you
Mm-hmm.
watch such a tale, you're seeing inputs, there were abusive relationships, they were saying, and notice all these things typically end badly.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm? So, what are you giving? You're telling the system, and in this case, the human system, that all these things end badly. You're training them.
Uh-huh.
And you're training them in a manner that if you put people in a room with headphones and said, okay, and here is this chant, abusive relationships are bad, abusive relationships are bad, who would have gone subjected themselves to hours and hours of this? Nobody. Netflix is
Mm-hmm.
doing
Though
the same.
though there are frameworks that get people to do even that.
There are, but they happen in some other cases. In most cases they don't. So the
Most
chanting
cases they don't.
frameworks and everything are very different. Wherein the chant is not what the message in the chant is not important. The chant becomes important. Here the
Uh-huh.
messaging is important. So chanting per se, I would say, is a very different framework, wherein the content of the chanting is really not important. The process of chanting is more important because of its mechanical process and the way it plays on our mind and puts in.
So Lokesh, tell me one thing. I understand this that literature and stories essentially train our mind. Our physiology is
So not only
the
train our
brain.
mind, everything trains our mind. They create
Uh-huh.
these hypothetical scenarios, one, and second, they give us those number of cycles for that training to start to
Fine.
get formed.
Fine. So basically a stimulus response kind of an experience, and that repeated over several cycles, several repetitions,
And done very willingly. So
done
there is
very
no resistance.
willingly.
So you are
So
absorbing it. You are glued
fine.
to the screen and absorbing it and following it. That
Perfect.
you're not switching off your machine learning system at that point.
I'm not resisting it. I'm embracing
No, no,
it.
not resisting. You're
Perfect.
you're you're like glued.
I'm glued into it. So that's one part. Stories are training me. I am embracing them of my own accord. I am happy. I feel cool when I get myself trained by stories. The other part is that the trends that we see in stories somehow connect to the need of the system and whatever that system is of that time, the context. If people, or if the system needs that everybody be trained into romance, we have a lot of romance literature coming up. If the system needs that everybody needs to be trained into crime detection, that crime would be detected even if nobody sees you, then we have a bunch of crime stories, crime detection stories coming up. If the system wants us to get trained into, okay, violence is bad, does not make sense, a lot of jealousy, envy, all of that, maybe a lot of competitiveness is not good eventually. So there is a whole bunch of those kind of stories. So there is this system needs, and then there is this training aspect of it. But
And
why do I?
one more part
Yes.
of it.
Uh-huh.
And most of these stories have a very definite binary kind of answers to it,
Very definite binary answer.
which is
Fine.
important. Think about machine learning, which needs an output to tune its system. If they don't
So-
leave it ambiguous, they
So
give
I
you
am
a
getting
very
machine
hard
trained.
answer.
I am getting machine trained. My question is, why do I, as an individual, like these kind of stories now? Why did I, as an individual, like crime detection stories in the era of Agatha Christie? Why did I, in the time of romance literature, as an individual, like romance literature? Why did I, in the time of Shakespeare, like Shakespearean literature? So, because I, as an individual, have got nothing to do with the needs of the system. I am not tuned into it. I have nothing to do with it, right?
Obviously.
So why do so many people like me start liking these stories?
Start liking a Mirzapur today. Yeah?
Yes, I then the question is, fine. System has a need of a lot of these stories.
Yeah.
Okay, why do I like them? Why do the viewers like them?
So here again, two things here, and this is a difficult question, and I probably would not have a fairly convincing answer to it. So let's put that in. But what we need to probably feel here is that, in some sense, what the system is trying to figure out, we are also a part of that same system. So we are getting. So it's not just one. So it's not that there was a time then and there is a time in. Everything is the same. And that time you read Sherlock Holmes. Today you watch this. The context again has a lot of variables here which are pushing us in certain directions. So if we try and figure them out deeply, there would be pointers there why this is happening. Second, I think so the more important thing is with a delta push there. This is like a supply demand piece. This is what we see in technology. With a small thing and with network effects, those systems become so robust and powerful. That is what probably a lot of venture theory and technology is about. So those very delta pushes, the delta advantages actually scale with supply. So what you watch on Netflix is again a function of what gets created. There is a supply and a demand. Now, if we can figure out some delta changes there and start creating that system. So what I'm trying to say is that you are not making a choice into. So like we talked about that Bayesian model there is a Bayesian model here also. So you're not making these two choices in two different contexts. You're making these choices in two different. You're not making them into identical contexts at a large level. Keep that in mind. So you're getting influenced with that. And how do we influence it and why it happens? I think we need to discuss that angle and figure out some reasons for it. That how does it play out? But somewhere it is in this circular in this cycle that we see. We see those cycles everywhere. So there would be some leading pieces that would help us figure them out.
If we assume that a lot of that consumption is driven by increased supply, because there are so many crime stories, violent stories, therefore I watch them. I have 10
so that is the
stories, 8 of them
mainstreaming
are,
of it. That's the super mainstreaming that happened.
So then maybe the better question is, why that sudden glut in supply? why that glut and supply during romance literature? Why that glut and supply of that particular
Now, if
type
you
of
look at
stories?
it, if you look
Yes.
at that again, maybe a very small event would have generated it. If you finally
Uh-huh.
go back and debug it and try and figure out the reasons, these systems, these changes are not coming from very large system equilibrium shifts. Very
Uh-huh.
small delta events can lead to this.
Mm-hmm.
So that's probably very critical here. So when we think about these shifts, to some extent, we believe these are large systemic shifts, and hence we think there is this thing that was happening and which has gotten replaced by this thing. So the transition has to be at this scale.
Uh-huh.
Think about what we see in venture today. Think about it. There
Mm-hmm.
is a incumbent company. There is a Walmart and Walmart way of doing commerce and retail in the US, and there was a startup called Amazon. With some
Mm-hmm.
cycles, today Amazon is 4x, 5x more valuable than a Walmart for
Mm-hmm.
whatever reason. So, but they grew in sight of each other.
Mm-hmm.
And I would tend to argue that the strategy that Walmart took up when it did not really go head on with Amazon was correct.
Mm-hmm.
Because if Amazon was so obvious, Amazon, if I remember it right, raised money from Axel and these guys at a 30 million valuation.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm? I think SoftBank refused to put in money into Amazon, or there is some story Masa Yoshison refused because of valuation or some issues there. No,
Uh-huh.
something that's worth 2 trillion today. If it was so obvious,
Mm-hmm.
means it wouldn't have happened. The
Won't
valuation
have
of
happened.
Amazon at that time was its correct valuation.
Mm-hmm.
If
Uh-huh.
Amazon in 95 raised money at 30 million, or 93 raised money at 30 million, and Walmart then was what, say maybe 20, 30, 40 billion, then would it have made sense for Walmart to leave its core strategy and start looking like Amazon? It won't have worked.
Obviously not. Uh-huh.
Obviously.
Won't have
So
worked.
keep that context. So these are these delta things, and the system becomes big. That is how change happens.
Mm-hmm.
To now we think that e-commerce was so obvious, it should have happened, the supply shifted.
Mm-hmm.
That's how change is happening. And to
Mm-hmm.
some extent, Walmart is still very large.
Mm-hmm.
Probably in terms of retail sales, it's still bigger than Amazon in the US. So keep
Mm-hmm.
that context in mind. When that supply is getting created, there could be very small factors which are, and how are these factors aligning, which is important. It's not that a billion people one day started to look at crime fiction one day and it started to happen. It never happens that way. There is a lot of evolutionary processes here. So the system is evolutionary in nature. It's the system
Uh-huh.
is not like a dicta. It's not dictating. It's not agency. Even the system does not have agency in itself.
Mm-hmm.
Evolution is non-deterministic. Now, how
And
is this?
obviously there are smaller things in the context around which sort of start making more sense for Amazon, and uh, uh, which essentially lead to those cycles that eventually reach this size.
Absolutely. So, if,
I mean,
remember movies
the
in India
context
in the
changes.
60s, 70s, which were
Uh-huh.
far more social in nature, had angry young man at the center of it, the Amitabh Bachchan and the earlier thing. Two contexts that virtually is missing from Indian cinema in
Mm-hmm.
the last 20 to 30 years. It just
Mm-hmm.
went away. Why did it get created? Some small sparks, people saw it, it appealed. It's got an evolutionary framework to it itself.
Mm-hmm.
They found it contextual. A very small set of people led to that shift happening.
Yes.
Maybe today, if you make social stories which were so interesting and they kept on evolving, probably we can still construct them.
Mm-hmm.
But they're just gone. Today, if
Mm-hmm.
you look at it, if you look at popular Hindi movies, we're talking about a lot about man-woman relationships, marriage relations, something we never went into.
We never went into.
Typically, most movies would have ended once the marriage happened. that was the end. You would see that the end come there.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the point of for most movies. Today, a lot of movies start wherein the marriages happen.
Start with the marriage. Yeah.
That's a shift that we see. Now, what's driving that shift?
Mm-hmm.
Again, we'll need to look at very small factors of evolutionary nature in that. But the fact
I
that these
think.
stories are becoming mainstream is probably the more
Uh-huh.
interesting thing, or
I
is
think.
what we're looking at.
I think your angry young man example sort of gives an entry into this idea. I mean, if we look at the angry young man phenomena, like you said, some people sort of discovered some niche or the idea occurred to them for some reason. Salim Javed are essentially credited with creation of that phenomena. So, these two bright people did something and put something out in the market. And then it sort of caught on. And then once they saw some validation of that idea, they sort of did it in a much bigger way. And then those cycles got started. And then for the next
Absolutely.
20 years, we had this
We had
thing
this
going on.
phenomena.
Mm-hmm.
And it's
And
fairly interesting
obviously,
that even Salim Javed as screenwriters, scriptwriters probably could not transition out of it to a fair degree.
could not transition out of it. Also, around that time, probably there were such elements in the system or something in the context which sort of resonated with the idea. This is like Zanjeer is 73, so this is like 73, 74, 75 time frame. And probably there were some things in the context which sort of resonated, the frequency sort of matched, and then it took
Mhm.
off.
And it
Very
took off
similar
and
to how the Amazon Walmart story, when Amazon got funded, there were some things in the system which sort of resonated with it and which led to sort of successive cycles which increased the size. So maybe
absolutely.
that's how yeah, the shift happens.
So again, it's evolutionary. So what we're
It
saying
is
is that is
evolutionary.
evolutionary. Now, evolution happens in a certain way,
I
but
think
it has
evolution
these
is
implications.
ev- evolution again is a great model to explain this. What we are basically saying is that some mutation happened and something in the system, in those surroundings or in the environment, just favored that mutation, and then it sort of took off and took several cycles and just became mainstream.
Absolutely. And it propelled. So more natural selection, more value
Mm-hmm.
coming in, more people jumping into it, and the supply becomes mainstream. The question that I'm trying to argue here is that at times mainstreaming helps us understand what's happening. And the angle to mainstreaming, the contra angle that we're saying is it is probably helping us look at if this phenomena works for a fair period of time. We're probably seeing how violence will be looked at.
Mm-hmm.
So either it's one thing that happened, maybe. So if I put it in a Darwinistic framework, multiple mutations, multiple species, multiple organisms that come up. If there is
Mm-hmm.
some longevity to it, some stable point to it, it represents something very large. There could be
Uh-huh.
organisms that come up, which we typically call as fads or something, and then they disappear.
Here we are talking about larger shifts like aquatic animals and then we have land animals, or aquatic animals, amphibians, and then land animals instead
What
of
we're
just.
talking about is that is there enough capacity here that it can result in machine learning. So,
Uh-huh.
so the two
Mm-hmm.
correlations is this is your rep cycle, this is your exposure cycle. Will it lead to machine learning?
Mm-hmm.
And on top of it, I would tend to argue that we are probably in the richest phase of machine learning as humans today.
Historically richest. I mean,
Yeah,
humans have,
historically.
yeah, maybe next 10 years we could just take machine learning to next level.
No, no, machine learning. Which machine learning are you referring to?
Okay, not for humans. Hmm.
That is what we are
Yeah.
creating. I'm saying the way video is and the projective nature of video and the way that you can get consumed into it and the amount of time we
Mm-hmm.
are spending into it is accelerating our ability to learn machine learning.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Mm-hmm.
So we are in a faster phase. So when we talked about those pop things again, so there is a cycle. Earlier, it took so many cycles for something to become mainstream. There was a strong distribution problem there. What we're seeing today with media is that these ideas can go to 8 billion people, or maybe a large slice of that population in a year. And if they see enough, if they see maybe 50 episodes of it, or if they spend say 200 hours on it, you know that the system is starting to get retrained.
And at a much faster pace.
At a breakneck speed here.
Breakneck speed.
This is happening at a breakneck speed because of, again, so we could, like, we constructed this construct of man years. So I was just thinking about the man years concept. I think so we discussed it yesterday. If there were 10 million people, which is what we think about in 10,000 BC, and today we are sitting at 8 billion, let's say. So that's a factor of 800. So 1 year of that time in man-year terms is equivalent to 800 years, or 800 years of that time is equivalent to 1 year. So if we evolve from 2 lakh years to this, which is what we're 200,000 years. So 200,000 divided by maybe 800, or maybe even a larger number, because 10 million was the increased population. Maybe if I double it, say, or make it say 2,000. So 200,000 divided by 2,000 is 100. So the evolution that we saw in man-year terms from 200,000 years to say 10,000 years is probably similar in man-year terms to the 100-year cycle that we have seen. In man-years, these two are equal. That 200,000 year period in man-years is similar to, say, the last 150 years. Which is why we are seeing time compressed in terms of change.
In terms of machine learning of human mind.
No, in terms of man years of innovation that we're doing. We're not talking about machine learning here. Now, the other metric now we can look at is that the machine learning pace is also picking up because the exposure and the capacity of media that we have. So if media exposure, and we know media exposure changes very fast. So you don't see movies and you don't see serials which were 10 years ago or 20 years ago. With this on-demand distribution and this, everybody is clued into the current media. Vis-a-vis the earlier model that a new idea comes up, a new social structure comes up, you build stories around it, they take 2, 3, 4 generations to get distributed. Everybody's glued on to the new ideas, and you're spending maybe 4 hours a day, 3 hours of a day getting trained in them, which was much larger than the earlier systems. So if we compute the machine learning hours, if we can compute that, we would probably be, again, like we looked at those 100 years, 150 years being equal to this entire evolutionary cycle that Homo sapiens have. We're probably sitting at another, maybe a large factor on top of it in terms of machine learning.
Lokesh, the interesting question here then is, what we are saying is that the speed of machine learning of humans has suddenly increased. Machine learning of our brains has suddenly increased because of the exposure, because of the repetition of those exposures, also because of immediate access across the board.
Earlier, this is not what we are saying. No, this is not what we are saying. The fact, what we're saying is that you need exposures for machine learning. You couldn't change those exposures. So 100 years ago, the exposure, suppose you and I were living 100 years ago. So the exposures you would have been very similar to your father, who would have exposures very similar to his father. And that framework that the exposures we had for machine learning purpose would not have become, would change at a very slow pace because you couldn't get those exposures. You were machine learning, but you had very few exposures, and hence the newer concepts took much longer to get imbibed. Today, what we are happening is, one, because this media has become on demand, it's current. It's completely current.
Mm-hmm.
So the newer stuff which is getting created today is getting distributed and seen, and also it is getting seen at a rate. So if you look at the new part cycle, if it was X 100 years ago, maybe you're looking at 10 100x of that cycle time, exposure time.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that we have
Mm-hmm.
become better machine learners. No, we are same.
No, we have not. The inputs that we are getting, the nature of that has changed. More variety of inputs,
Has changed at a very large level.
a very
It's an
large level.
order change.
Variety of
It's an
inputs, uh, a humongous variety of inputs, which was not available earlier.
variety is not
Also,
important. Variety is not important.
no. What else? What else do you mean when you say that 100 years ago my inputs would have essentially been similar to my
The
father?
currentness of it. So the new change that somebody wants to push out, everybody is getting exposed to it now, and at a
No,
larger. So the
there, there
exposures
are
have
there are there
increased.
are two that there are two parts to it. One part
Mhm.
is the inputs themselves. Okay,
Yeah.
the variety of inputs. If I have lived 100 years ago in a small town village, small town UP, then the
Mhm.
inputs come from that context. My father, the people that I spend my time with. Today I get
I would
inputs.
not agree with variety, because again there is a superiority feeling that we build in variety. Maybe my variety comes that I start observing the wind speed, that has variety. I look at climate, I look at this. So variety as we look at it, I think is not the right way. So I get machine learned on those frameworks, which were probably very old. Today those aspects just don't matter to me.
No, what I'm saying is that today I have, and I'm not talking about external ideas being better. Okay,
Mhm.
I'm saying the inputs that I am bombarded with.
Mhm.
It could be a Spanish crime drama. It could be a Belgian bank robbery story. It could be a Israel-Palestinian conflict story. It could be some jealous husband in Brazil. All of
Mhm.
those stories are available to me. Whereas at 100 years ago, the only stories that were available to me were those from around my village. So the spectrum of inputs coming to the machine learner that my brain is, that
Mhm.
has suddenly opened
So
up in a very,
I'm
very big way.
questioning the spectrum. I'm questioning the spectrum. So I don't think so. That's
Okay.
very critical. What is
Okay.
important is the cycle time of those changes.
And what do you mean
So
by cycle time?
for a certain new set of stories or stories which were
Uh-huh.
there. So earlier we used to say that the towns and the cities have a different culture. The next level have a different. They took a cycle time to move from one step to the other. That time, so what happens here is now happening here in terms of
So
exposure to things.
that pyramid
So it's
has
not
cracked.
variety. So I would not call it variety and spectrum. I think that I would strongly
No,
push
no.
back on
See,
it.
there are two factors. The other factor is that earlier the ideas reached us through a trickle down effect, through a pyramid. Okay, what you are saying
Which
is
meant
that
cycle time.
pyramid,
Which meant cycle time.
so that
Not
pyramid
which
structure has collapsed. That has become
yeah,
totally flat. Okay,
absolutely.
that's one part. That's one part.
Mhm.
You are saying spectrum. Okay,
So not spectrum. We're not talking variety, because the
this is
moment you
this is
start.
not spectrum. No, no. These are two different factors. One factor is pyramid has collapsed. The
Mhm.
ideas immediately reach the small towns, the big towns, the metros, New York City, everywhere.
Mhm.
That's one part. The other part is that ideas from everywhere reach these places, whereas earlier only local ideas
Ideas from everywhere reached earlier also. So what
were sort
happened
of
in
active
Europe,
in machine
the
learning.
ideas of democracy or that came up in Europe reached India, reached everywhere. The cycle time has collapsed.
Okay.
The variety is
Okay.
still there.
You're saying that. You're saying that idea. So we are assuming that ideas from everywhere eventually have reached me, but the
Mhm.
difference that is coming is in terms of crashing of that pyramid. The trickle down effect is gone. Everything is instantaneous.
And this is, I would say, there is a
Is that what you're saying?
strong, yeah, absolutely. And what I would try and argue also, that there is a very high risk that puts on the system. The system is becoming riskier.
Lokesh,
because
I
of
think I also have a couple of questions in this. I think one thing that would be very interesting is for me at least to try and figure out what kind of changes that we would see and at what pace.
So again,
Should
changes don't
we?
become deterministic. Evolution is non-deterministic.
So which means
So
we can't
don't try
predict
and make
what.
that. Yeah,
So we
you
are
can't
saying
predict.
we can't predict what life would be 5, 10 years down the line. We can probably
No,
predict trends
maybe
in
those
terms
cycles,
of.
5, 10 years, 5, 10 years, we know what it would be largely speak, because the changes
Okay.
would be at a delta level. But maybe we're talking about here 50 years, maybe 100 years, we don't know. 5, 10 years, no issues. So go home, sleep peacefully, no issues.
No. So what you're saying is that deterministic time frame is essentially 5, 10 years. We can't say what will happen in 5, 10 years, but we can probably predict what will happen in 50 years. Is that what you're saying?
No, what we're saying is that can we what can is the evolution cycle. So earlier, if you look at history, what happened in say 1 AD and 100 AD and 200 AD were very similar.
Very similar.
But what happened in say 5000 BC, what
Mm-hmm.
happened in say 1 AD and what happened in say 2000 AD were very different.
Mm-hmm.
Those were the cycle times that we have seen largely.
Those cycle
If we go
times are
back,
getting reduced significantly.
they, and those cycle times might now be 50 years, 100 years.
50 years, 100 years. All right, Lokesh, should we close today?
Yeah, and I think we should continue with this idea maybe
We
Monday
should
with
continue with this.
Adrian.
Yeah.
There
Let's
might be some things that we'll explore. We might.
let's continue with this idea Monday onwards.
Let's do that.
All right.
Okay.
So great discussion. Bye bye everyone. Have a great night, great weekend. Bye.
Bye.